Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Katie, for inviting and for putting up this podcast and all the stuff you also arranged with the Imagine project.
What I wanted to jump into with the first question is that your experience with being a city architect, like how green space actually gets put through planning policy and how it gets made. Why does the process get slowed down doing it the old way when we don't have tools like AR and visualization? We're just letting it done the way it's been done for the last 50 years. Like, what are the problems and the way it gets stymied when we don't have these tools available to us?
That's maybe the basic question why we founded the Lala Ruhr. Lala means Landscape Laboratory of Ruhr Metropolis. And maybe if you don't know, the Ruhr Metropolis is one of the biggest metropolitan areas in Europe. It's a bunch of cities in the heart of Germany. And there are 5 million people living in quite spread area consisting of 13 or more towns. And as every city, also our area is facing climate change. And this climate adaptation discussion is focusing so much on green city issues. And the idea of Landscape Laboratory is to discuss urban areas, a part of a landscape, maybe somehow connected to the idea of the new ecology, so that even cities are part of an ecosystem, and that the green is a very important part to become a resilient and livable city in climate change times. And so we describe this as a landscape. So the word Landscape Laboratory of a metropolitan area is our logo and our theme. And we have this idea of think landscape in urban areas. So the design of this, the redesign of our cities is, it sounds very simple, but it's turning around so many things 180 degrees. So if we think about where is our water going, so the traditional city is just getting the water out of the city. Rain is falling, water is going, people in the city to bring the wastewater, the shit out of the city. So that's the traditional system of our cities. And if we are facing climate change, we have to be very much more aware of the water. And that's as part of this ecosystem, also connected to issues like resilience in storm water, heavy rains. It's connected to cooling effects in hot days, to keep the water in the ground for the days when you have a dry season. It's connected to health and livability in front of your door. So if you have trees and working green infrastructure, you find a place in front of your door where you can stay and where you can connect, and you have also the possibility to meet and not to leave with your car to a place where you find that ecological connection or to reconnect to nature. And if you really imagine that this is turning around also the infrastructure in underneath the surface, so like the wastewater systems and what is coming from your roofs and from your surfaces, and where the roots of trees are going, what you find there today is like glass fiber cables, gas pipelines, and electricity. And so all the soil of the surface of our cities, it's all rebuilt in the last decades, and it's not able to work inside the ecosystem. So it's not keeping the water, there's no root space for trees. So that is a really big issue in our cities. And so the idea of transforming the city to become a resilient part of an ecosystem is, for us, it's the key, the center of our discussion. And it really is a strong task to think about change and to discuss change, even if you follow up more the other issues or big trends like mobility. So how to change your public space to become a better place. And for discussing the change, it's always great to have a positive picture, imagine that picture. And that was the idea of our project, Imagine Green Urban Futures. And we discussed how can we use XR technologies to transport this positive images and positive visions of spaces you use every day in your daily life. So you leave your front door and you have a street in front of your door, which is not green at all, but you can park your car there and you know the space since many years. And if it does change, so people so often they have fear on what will happen to my daily life if the things are changing. And that's how we started with the idea of this imagine green urban futures.
And when we were talking before, one thing I thought you mentioned that was really interesting is that when we talk about AR, it sounds fancy and futuristic and maybe like complicated and expensive, like high technology. But from what you were saying is that the old way of doing landscape architecture and architectural design was that you had to have like an RFP and it would cost thousands of dollars to do a design in the proper professional architectural software, and then it takes days to render, and a huge computer with a whole bunch of CPU. So really what you were saying was that creating these sort of lighter augmented reality experience can be a much faster way to like sandbox ideas and to show different visualizations. And it could be a sort of a much more rapid way to help presenting ideas than the sort of like the old way of doing architectural design. Could you talk a little bit more about your experience with that? And I think you also mentioned this intersection or this convergence of architecture and gaming technology that was really interesting.
What I think is, so I'm an architect from education and urban planner, and I've been used to draw my drawings with a pencil on papers and to put it on the wall. And if you start discussing 2D technical drawings with people, it's always you need a high level of understanding of that drawings, and it's really hard to imagine something. What does it mean in reality for my daily life? So the traditional discussion on architecture is on papers, and you put them on the wall, and then you invite citizens or people, and so you start discuss these designs. And even if you have the 3D designs on the paper, it's only one point of view, and it's not really easy to get into that design with a 3D understanding. Some people have if they're educated or if they're talented, but so many people don't have the imagination from 2-dimensional drawing to get into that design. And in the world of architects, it is very common that we have this 3D renderings and make this small videos to present your infrastructure project or your apartment design, but mostly it is used to sell things. So people invest in that 3D design to be able to get more money out of the projects. But I think what's a really high potential is that if we can make these designs accessible and understandable to everybody, so this augmented reality or virtual reality is able to be very easily to get into your brain and your understanding. So if you see it, you really understand. You don't have to explain, you can experience it. And this technologies from this XR sector, they are have been developed very much in the gaming sector in the last years already. And there have been like a parallel development in the gaming sector and in this architectural design sector. And it's really interesting to join this, and because there are like different engines and different software types and different kinds of objects they use. And I think what I think is really helpful in this urban design discussion is that design is easy accessible. So you just take your smartphone, your iPad, your Google, and you just experience the design of your new city plaza or of your new town hall or whatever. So people just can sit at home, or they go on site and they just take their gadget and then they experience, and then they, oh yes, I like it, or I don't like this part of the design. And so you can get easily in that discussion. And the merge of these different worlds of technology is quite interesting. And we try to push it to invite people from the game design, from universities, from planning, and also from different sectors like scene design or from art sectors to bring them together to discuss this potential. And there's still a way to go. So it's not that architectural offices are used to use these, so they don't have experience, so many, if they don't have experience in that, they don't have the technology in their offices. But I think it's only a small step to go, so future is coming close.
And how can we use these augmented reality experiences like what you've developed to make change happen faster? Because we're talking about public land most of the time, aren't we? Or private land. We need city governments to be involved. I mean, there's a whole bunch of processes. I mean, I don't know how long it takes for a city to like plant new trees or build some green infrastructure or take some concrete out. I mean, from your experience, how do we just make it all happen faster?
Yeah, I think it makes the discussion on the change, it makes it much more easy to implement design if people agree and I have a positive vision of it. So that's the thing I think we need. We need a much more involvement in the redesign of public spaces, because also I experience in my daily life that people are discussing every parking slot, and because they only think of their small parts of their life they really want to keep and want to say that that's the way I live. I want to be sure tomorrow it's the same. But if people are willing to be with the change and to support that redesign, it makes things much more easy on the local government level.
I see. So we need something that's like a public engagement tool, because basically not everybody, but some people will really not want to give up parking spaces. This is going to be something that's going to inhibit. And I've heard this from like a number of people as well. I think Tim might have run into this with his work that he was trying to do some traffic calming, that from what I'm sort of paraphrasing our conversation, but that it's not so difficult if you don't want to take away any parking spaces. As soon as you want to take away a parking space, all the dramas arise, right? So in order for the government to do something fairly bold, they need to make sure that their whole community is behind it. And this question that comes up all the time for me, as I sort of call myself a behavior designer, is people say, why do you care about individual action when we need systems change? But one of the big sort of pillars of that conversation is the system, which is like the government can't change unless it has the support of the people behind it. So we need to do a lot of engagement around individual people. So basically, if we can use these fun, engaging tools to get people really behind these concepts, it makes it easier for the city government to make stuff happen that might be a bit controversial, as in like taking away some things that some people like. Is that yeah. Am I on the right path?
I think so. I think our technologies won't make it all happen. So that because it's only helping us to discuss and to implement and to redesign and to involve people in redesign. So we also tried a module where people just have the AR gadget and they can place trees or benches or something in front of their door and can experience how can this space look like if I redesign it. And if you live on a street where is no tree at all and there are only cars rushing and you have a small pedestrian area only, and you leave your house with your children and the only way to escape is go to your car and leave. And it can be a place to stay and to have a quality of life and to meet your neighbors, and you don't have to care for the security of your children. So there's a high potential, and you also can tackle this climate change issues in this public space. So if you connect this public space also to this ecosystem approach and to rainwater management and to biodiversity, and so people can have better surrounding in this, maybe also in this idea of the 1 minute city. So you leave your door and there's a place to be, there's a place to meet friends, and there's a place to experience nature even in the urban environment. So that's a way we are trying it. And in our idea was more to have it like experimental project. So we try technology and we try to involve people, and we also had one part. So we have a street in Gelsenkirchen in our area, which we divided in 4 sectors, and people could experience these sectors in different redesigns. And there was also one sector where people just can design themselves. So they could place their horses or trees or whatever. So also like a little bit more chaotic way to redesign, because everybody was able to put objects there. And so the design changed all the time, but it helps. I think it helps a lot to make people aware that public space can change and that they can be completely different.
Just one last thought I had on that, which was I'm really curious about this practice of environmental imagination as just a psychological practice. We had another guest, Joshua Wright, who'd done an academic study on getting people to do these environmental imagination exercises, and they were just with a pen and paper. And what was really interesting about his research is that he had one group where they just read what somebody else had written about what an sustainable future was. And then he had another group where they actually had to ideate themselves. They said, imagine a future where climate change is solved. What would this world look like? And then for 15 minutes, they had to write different ideas. And what was really interesting was that the one where they just had to passively absorb the information didn't have that much of an effect. They tested environmentally friendly behaviors, and they also tested whether people would write a letter to like a green senator. It had a little bit of effect, but not that much. But the one where the people were actually actively engaged in coming up with the ideas, it had a really significant effect. And it's sort of putting together this picture that I'm starting to see, is that when people are actively coming up with their own ideas, they're engaging in a creative process of doing some environmental imagining, that is an enormously psychologically powerful practice that really deeply engages people in ways that spill over into all other parts of their life. And when we're just passively taking in environmental education, like we're just looking at someone else's artwork, or we're watching a documentary, or just reading a book, or we're just absorbing it, we're just a sponge for the information, we're not actually the practitioner of the information, that doesn't work nearly as well as when people are doing it. So I suspect that by having this extra feature, I mean, you could have built this whole project where you were just like, hey, look, we did it all for you. Like, here's the street. Like, we just got all these architects, and they're all really talented, and look at the great design we did. Now everybody can see it. I think actually letting people do it themselves will spill over into a whole different sort of behaviors in a totally different way that we probably don't quite know yet. Did you notice that something happened when people were actually doing it themselves, that there was some different level of engagement than if they were just passively looking at someone else's design?
Yeah, so I experienced this also in non-digital environments, that if you involve people in something and they are starting to create their own ideas in like a 3D model in reality, in like a small, build a small model of it. And then also if they have to explain what they did, so this is really like leveling up. If people are able to have their own idea and to build something on it, to explain it to other people. So that's, I think, really important. In our project, we had this more like, people just walked on the street and they redesigned the streets by the walk. So they just took something and we just had a view on what they did. So how did this streetscape change during the days, these 2 days we run the project? And so the next step would be to keep it in a real project, in a real redesign. So we have been just also in a test mode of this software and this technology. So I think it really worked really well, and people really get involved in that tool and they used it a lot. So it was really fun to see how this spaces changed during the day. People just put their greens and trees and everything in that public space.
Yeah, have you got some more images that you can show with the screen share? I posted a few on the email, but maybe you have some more.
The project we did, Imagine Green Urban Futures, and it was in part of a festival. It's called the Places Virtual Reality Festival. So this festival is about all kinds of virtual reality, from universities, from art, from economy, from everything. And we had a part which was only connected to this design of urban spaces. and architectural design. And we made it together with CityScaper. Robin is also here, and we have a street. It looked like this. So this is one of the streets in Gelsenkirchen, and where this festival is also taking place in the whole neighborhood, and it has several spots where people can just walk around and try these technologies in several different aspects. And we took this street and we used a digital twin of that area, and we divided it in these sectors. We had three different designers. One is Greenbox, is a landscape architectural office. They did part of the design. It's called the Green Canyon. The Anya Cambria Irlamanchi is a scene designer and also designing exhibition spaces. And the Pimento Formate, they are doing more interactive designs, which have a more educational approach. And we had this as this part of the street where people have been free to design their own parts. And so people just walk around can walk with their gadget. So this is the iPad, and you just have a view of the street. And in the gadget, you see the design implemented really exactly into the environment. And if you move the iPad, you really have the design on screen. So it really looks realistic through this magic window. And you also can use your smartphone and just walk around and have a look. And I have a small video on it. It's only 1 minute. So I will try to start it. So this is about also the part of the festival where we had discussion and talks. And we also invited different artists which have been working in this imagination idea. And so how to educate people and to involve people in that imagination. And so people walked around and used their own gadgets, or also gadgets we provided, which the iPad Pro was really one of the best experiences because of this enormous great screen and power. And so people have been able to experience this all around, but we also implemented some other discussions on virtual reality and on also 2D imagination tools from Jan Kaminsky in that discussion. And maybe that's some pictures where you can imagine how the project worked and how we involve people in that. I think also Robin will also have some information more on the technical part, and he is also professional in redesigning street spaces and discuss cycling lanes.
Yeah, awesome. Well, let's jump into getting into the technical side with Robin. Thank you for sharing all of that, Sebastian. And then we'll chat to Robin a bit about the technology. Hi, Robin. Sorry you've had to wait 45 minutes to get your time on the screen, but thanks for joining so early. So awesome. I thought we would start with LiDAR because that's what really makes this project with augmented reality different to the other augmented reality stuff in this space that other people have done. Can you explain, for a start, what LiDAR is? Because not everybody is going to know what that is, and where you got the LiDAR from for this particular project, where people might get it from for their own projects. And maybe you could go into the detail levels, level 1, level 2, level 3 details of LiDAR and what that means.
So we have in German, it's actually a German thing. It's called LOD2. It's a version of 3D modeling cities. You've seen it in Sebastian's photos as well, where we have this digital twin of the city. Luckily in Germany, the government flew over the whole area with planes, and they have LiDAR scanners on them. It's a laser scanner, and you can measure distances to the ground, and then you can build a 3D point cloud of the whole area, and then they convert it to those LOD2 models where you have level of details and have all the different buildings in it and the height of the ground. And with all that information, we can basically say tell the smartphone or the mobile device in the end, how far is everything away? Where do you have an edge of a building? So the virtual things are occluded by this edge and disappear behind it to get a really realistic feeling. And also if we want to place object in the area, we don't have to run around with the phone to scan the whole area ourselves, but the smartphone already knows where all the things are, and we can directly position things also far away from us. And those data is in Germany. It's under public license, for example, in my province, in North Rhine-Westphalia. In other provinces, you can buy the data from the cities or buy it from the provinces. But unfortunately, since it's the government, sometimes you have to write a lot of emails or even send a letter to them with a license agreement to get the data. So not everything is available digitally. There are other websites online where you can get less detailed data. And currently, unfortunately, you can't get the data, for example, from Google. They have quite good data, but it's not publicly available. So generally, I advise to go to your government and check out whether they can provide you with some data for such projects.
And so just so we all understand what LiDAR is, it is a 3D model of a city taken by an aircraft. The aircraft does a complete scan of an urban environment, and then it takes everything like cars, roofs, trees, and you get this big shapefile of the city that is also geo-tagged, so you know exactly where it is and you can place it on an existing map software, right?
Yeah, like that. But then you take out the cars, for example, because they won't stay there forever. So they try to take out, there's a lot of software behind it. We are not developing ourselves. And generally, there are other good companies who mainly work on that. One company in Germany, it's a really small one. They have also airplane themselves flying over Germany. You can find those companies and they'll help you with it. And also tagging the different parts of the model, whether it's a house or a car or a tree and so on. So you can find out which parts are which and actually replace them, for example. Because if we want to change something in the street, sometimes we also have to remove things. So from this data, we often also know where we have to remove things and where there might be trees we have to somehow cover in the experience in the end.
Right. And you mentioned this thing about occlusion, which I'm sure is a word that only you in our group know what it is. Can you explain what that is and why and how you make it work, why the LiDAR is so important for this particular feature?
So the LiDAR scan and the 3D model we get from it tells us where, for example, the next house is. And if you place a tree behind a house, and you wouldn't see it normally because there's a house in between. But when you walk around the house, the tree suddenly appears because you can look around the house, the edge of the house. And this would be possible if also with augmented reality, because generally all the objects are just in the front. So you would just see a tree that somehow doesn't fit in the environment because it's actually behind the house, but you see it in front. And with those 3D models we get from the LiDAR scans, we more or less know where the house is located, and then we can calculate in the render pipeline what is behind the house and what's in front. And then you can directly put everything behind the house, which is behind the house, and everything in front, that's in front. One tricky challenge with that is then that you need to localize the smartphone quite exactly, so you know where to put the 3D model relatively to the world. And that's some of the tech we developed for the project with Sebastian and Lala Ruhr.
Right. So with existing goggles, what they have is that they'll have like a distance sensor or a laser on the outside of the goggle. So for example, if I'm in a room, it's real-time scanning my room environment. And these are objects that are close to me, right? And then you could do something like this, for example, in an indoor space that's populating. Maybe it's like leaves on a wall. It's like populating leaves on a wall, but it's not that dissimilar to when you do something in Instagram where I have like bunny ears on my face. It's like giving you a scan, it's fixing something through that real-time camera. Although that's probably just through the shape file rather than through the distance sensor. But when we're looking at the outdoor environment, I mean, these existing goggles, I mean, they can't scan all the way into the distance. If I want to see like a faraway building, they're going to come up really short, or literally short in terms of how far that they can do some sort of like augmented experience. So we really need, so basically having that LiDAR shapefile that enables you to have quite a depth of field, right? So you should be able to therefore have an infinite depth of field if I'm looking out onto even like a complete sort of city skyline or far into the distance, to be able to see all of this biophilic detail. Is that right? When we're doing it this way?
That's right, yeah. So those goggles, they have also LiDAR scanners. Actually, it's the same technology, but since they normally work on battery, They don't have the power to produce strong lasers. So it's like 5 meters they can scan. And it's actually quite helpful for augmented reality already, because the stability of the experience increases quite a lot. This is also why we mainly use those iPad Pros, because they have those scanners included, time of flight LiDAR scanners. But then I also have to admit that the localization technique then on quite far distances is not too exact. So if I'm 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers away from what I'm looking at, it's quite difficult to exactly get that located in the right position, because over distance, normally we have an error also in the angular position. So it might be 1 degree to the left or to the right. It's just really small from the position where I'm standing, but in the long run, those angular differences, errors, they scale up quite a lot. So the further I go, the bigger it gets, and the translational error then. So we are limited nowadays to 150, 200 meters, something like that. It looks quite good. And beyond that, we normally advise people to go closer by and relocate the device. So we align the virtual and the real world again.
But I think 100 to 200 meters is great, though. I mean, if you've got 5 meters with an existing goggle with its weak sort of personal LiDAR, I mean, moving up to 100 meters, I mean, I don't think we necessarily need more than that in one of these experiences. So it's a huge jump in terms of what can be achieved doing it this way. And so this has to fix onto a map. Can you talk about what different map platform you used and how you made sure it was like, you must have done some work to make sure that the model and the application like sticks in the right spot, the geolocated spot?
So generally we use just Google AR Core and the Apple AR Kit backends. So they scan locally where the device is, and if you move, they scan the movement and detect it, and then relatively to that, reposition the virtual model so they seem like they stay in place. For the general global positioning, so to find out where the device is initially, we use then also those LOD2 models, and then we detect the most, or we detect iconic spots like edges and lines in the model and match them with edges and lines in the picture the camera is currently facing on. And then we match those two things and put the LOD2 model, the LiDAR scan model we got, directly on, relatively to the picture we have directly on the picture, and align that. This is called the calibration process. When we calibrated the whole thing, we then place so-called cloud anchors there, which is more or less we scan the environment with the mobile phone and send that to a cloud. It's also from Google. We send that to Google, the data. And then the next person who comes there scans the environment as well, sends his pictures and the environment he scans to the cloud. And then Google tells him how he's relatively positioned to the original scan, and the AR experience directly pops up by the second user. So we normally go to places, calibrate things, and then we have those cloud anchors and people can reposition them with the cloud anchors.
Right, so this point cloud system is just a feature in Google's existing software?
You can use it. Google provides it currently for free. Hopefully for longer it's for free. And you can just use it, that technology. There's also other providers. For example, Microsoft has Earth anchors introduced, and also Vuforia, it's another AR platform, has the same feature. So it all came out roughly in 2019. So for us, it's already old tech. But if you look around, there are not many applications currently using the technology. So it's quite.
All right. So does Mapbox, does that do it?
Mapbox doesn't have such features to relocate in 3D. You can use the GPS signal and use that, but generally it doesn't have those features.
Right. And is the Google one, is that part of the Google Maps portfolio of
it's part of the Google AR Core software. So AR Core is the Google software. It's an SDK from Google with which you can create augmented reality applications. It's also free to use. And the special thing about AR Core Cloud Anchor is that they run on iOS and Android. So on both platforms, on both mobile platforms. And that makes it so attractive to use.
Right. So it's really, this feature is just for like augmented reality applications. It's not just like a generic sort of mapping thing. Yeah. Interesting. Cool. So let's jump into Unity now. So you basically built the sort of the core application using Unity sort of as a game. And if anyone here is new to this, Unity is what would you call it? A game engine, a game making tool. I call it like Photoshop for games. I can't think of what else to call it, but it's not really like Photoshop for games, but you make games in it, but it's quite advanced. So can you talk about what sort of features you used in Unity and how you brought all of these different AR and geolocated elements in?
So Unity software, we mainly write shader code. Shader code is basically telling the device or calculating, for example, in the occlusion case, what's in front, what is behind. It also combines different things. So we have virtual objects, we have the rear camera objects, perhaps we have some tooltips, and that all has to be mixed. And Unity is basically managing that in the end you get the right pictures and the right things in front and at the back on your device. We use the Unity interface system, and then we include from external, we include the AR Kit and AR Core, the AR kits from Google and Apple into Unity. And then we use the object control of Unity. So each game, so-called game object in Unity is then, for example, a tree, and that makes it possible for us to let the people move around trees, place things into the AR scene, moving them around. Also changing, for example, the color of objects, things like that can be easily implemented in Unity, and they'll have a whole system for that. So, and the second important thing is Unity can build on web platforms, Android and iOS. So you just have to program everything once and you can deploy on all three platforms.
Right, cool. And with the assets or let's say the green elements, do they all need to be like a 3D model? Like you must have some, what I'm trying to say is you have surfaces, right? So maybe do you have some 2D models that are like sort of the surfacing over the existing LiDAR model? And then you would also have 3D models. For example, if you want to put in a tree, you can't just put in like a 2D tree. It must have to be like a 3D tree so it can like rotate and you can like move around. Can you talk about like how you made them and where you got them from? Are there existing libraries of all this stuff, or do you have to make them yourself?
So this is a big thing currently because AR needs a lot of 3D models. We recently had a project where we actually included people in a 2D way. They were just 2D objects to make it easier also to render and to not have so much performance used off by the people. But they're different. For example, the Unity Asset Store or October, there are different 3D libraries online. We can directly find that 3D assets where you can buy them. We mainly use Blender. It's an open source tool to model 3D objects and also to put textures like the color and the material properties, so how shiny it is, whether there's reflection onto objects. But since it's a lot of effort always for each project to generate new content, we have an object library by now that reduces the effort, but it's a lot of effort to model and put all those things together for each project. We're currently working on developing a tool similar to the one Tim mentioned in the chat already, where you can just auto-generate streets, where you can auto-generate bike lanes, and you can just say, I want to have a pedestrian walkway of 2 meters, and then I want to have a tree lane of 3 meters, and then I want to have 1 meter 30 bike lane. And we auto-generate that into the street with standards we have in the background. So everybody can just go to any street and auto-generate those streets and see, okay, how much space is left if I take away the cars, or how much space is left if I want to have a bike lane and that. Does it actually work, or do I need to see how I negotiate or share the space differently? So there we want to automate it a bit, so we don't have to model everything over and over again and put all that effort into each visualization, but can be a bit quicker on the job.
Right. I mean, it's not a very glamorous thing or the fun thing to talk about is like file size. But our last guests made augmented reality, like these little experiences using Instagram Spark AR, but they do them specifically for creating viral environmental campaigns. And I asked them what's the hardest thing, the biggest challenge? And they were just like file size. So like, they're so strict on approving, like you can't submit a like you have to like submit it to Instagram once you finished your experience, but you've got to keep it under, I can't remember how many megabytes. And they just said, as soon as you go from 2D into 3D models, it increases the file size so much. They're just constantly wrestling with all of their assets and the file size. I mean, is that like a really big issue when you've got to deal with something like a tree, which has so much detail? Like, how do you get a tree at a reasonable file size that you're not just, the thing is just so slow you can't make it load?
So trees generally not, they might look like they're trees and there are leaves on it, but generally they don't have real leaves in 3D world. It's more like a texture which imitates that. But we are currently struggling with it as well. So we have assets and they look really shiny and really great. And then we say we have to reduce them because file size is too big. Sometimes it's also render, like calculation power of the device itself when it has to render it. But generally we then put those things into Blender and reduce the file size as much as we can. And then the quality is a bit worse than before. And that's always a bit sad, but you have to deal with it if you want to send it via the internet, I guess, and make it available to more people.
Right. Sebastian just shared this picture of like grass and trees. So grass it looks like it has a lot of detail, like 3D grass, but you're saying it's just sort of like 2D grass pretending to look like 3D grass?
It's a 3D object, but it's more like a flat thing. I can't tell you exactly the details. I'm not the expert on those really specific rendering details. There are others who are better in that. But generally, it's an object which is more like a square. And then if you look at it from different sides, the texture and the different layers in the texture and its so-called UV normals, with them you can create a 3D effect without actually having to give it a lot of vertices. So a vertex is a dot, a real dot. So if I want to build a building, for example, I can make 4 dots and then 4 more dots and I get a square. So that would be then, let me calculate, 8 vertices because I have 8 edges at the end. But with grass, I normally have just also a square, but then the texture itself make it look like grass. And it's not actually a lot of dots going along the grass itself.
Right. I see.
Does make sense.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to ask questions now, put your hand up in the chat and I will call you out to ask Robin or Sebastian any questions, but I'll keep asking questions because nobody's got their hand up at the moment. So put your hand up if you want to dive in. So in terms of all the software, so you've got a combination of the LiDAR, Unity, Blender, and Google Maps and what was it called? The Google AR
Core.
Core. I'm going to write this down, AR Core. Did you have to develop any like custom application as well, or is it completely just within those 4 or 5 frameworks?
With those, you create a custom application in the end. So we have big code base, especially for the localization and rendering things. And then you need an interface for the app to actually access the AR experience. You need an interface which tells the people how to find those cloud anchors if they're on the street. You need an interface to calibrate the current model onto the real world. You need to rewrite the whole code base to match the real world, to detect the edges and to match it with the LiDAR scan models. So there's a lot of custom application behind it and a lot of programming behind it. We started the project originally in 2019. Back then I didn't know Sebastian. And currently we are doing also projects with different cities and private companies here in Germany. And we grew the team now at the beginning of the year up to 6 people. So we're 6 now working on the project and further developing it and hopefully, transforming cities and speeding up the process there to make the Imagine project happen and transform them faster, get more bike lanes in there, get more trees in there, and convince the politicians that it's the right way. I'm quite looking forward to the street planning tool we're currently working on because it will automate a lot, and we want to also introduce a bit more the backgrounds of planning in there to make it understandable to the people. So the aim is to also include, for example, the rules. As you said, people want to do something themselves, and in planning it's quite complex. And then there's certain widths you have to stick to, and there's certain measures you just have to keep, and we want to include those into the application. And the moment you make a bike lane bigger or smaller, or you introduce a new pathway, the software should check at least the most important rules, whether it's according to the law, what you're creating there or not, and tells you, okay, this is something we can't do because of those reasons, and this is something we can do. This is something we can't do because of those reasons. So actually that the software communicates with you. And then there's a second layer in the software we want to build. It's about CO2 emissions. So we have some data, we collect the data to check if I build a street in a certain design, for example, with protected bike lanes, how is the model split in the end? And often the model split changes if you, for example, introduce protected bike lanes. And based on the model split, then you can calculate the CO2 footprint of a street. So then we give advice on the CO2 footprint of certain designs of a street and just give more data to it. And I guess with that, we can perhaps also get quite close into the practice with the planners and the government and the people actually employed in planning, to some certain extent, reality, even though I like the imagination part as well, where everything just gets green and we directly have impact and see how beautiful our future and how livable our future cities could be like, like we did with Sebastian.
Well, I mean, I think it's great that you can cross the full spectrum of actually making a tool that's like genuinely useful for real change. We've got the laws and the limitations. You've also got a carbon calculator. So as you're doing it, it's giving you calculations. But as you're making it anyway, like you also have this other feature that it can just be like a sandbox for just coming up with whatever you want. And I mean, like I was saying earlier, I think these imagination exercises, even if they're not realistic, they like tap into a psychological core that we have inside us that other things aren't just gonna tap into. Other more realistic stuff isn't going to necessarily like tap into the same way. But I tell you what, if I was using it, I would want all the planning stuff turned off, because I would want to do like just like trees on everything, like crazy. I want to be like a giant, like a slide. Like when you're a kid, you always wanted like a slide that would come from something high up to down. It would just be like green slide and just like crazy.
It was the first
ramps,
images.
You know?
It was the first images we created. It was slides on the old town hall here in Aachen, so you could slide down onto the place below.
Yeah, I could never understand why. Yeah, slides. Like, why have these been taken out? I live in an apartment block now where there's like all these, it's about 3 stories high. And I'm just like, why is there not a slide that I can just put my child on and just slide them out? Like, nobody's done this. Yeah. But anyway, we'll get into we've got the questions now. So Daniel's had his hand up for a while, and as a good helper, letting people in helper, would you like to ask your question, Daniel?
Yes, thank you. Hallo. Robin und Sebastian, danke euch, weil es war sehr geil. I like the co-working, by the way, Robin, where you're sitting at, right? It's in Aachen. Thanks. There's a church converted. Yeah, that's super funky. So the question was more of an idea as well, what you think about it to create young children to ideas, sustainable thoughts in school. Someone asked the same question in the chat as well. So you're thinking like a reverse Pokemon Go, like you need to walk around and maybe plant special trees in tactical points, and then you can collect. I don't know, if you plant a baobab tree or something special, then you get more points or something like that. That would be cool as well, no?
Definitely, that would be a cool idea. I guess the education part is quite big, the whole project as well, to educate people what does it mean if I want to park my car in front of my house, what influence it has, and what other possibilities we have. So it's a great idea, and in our experiences so far, when we participated or when we had participants using our tool, we definitely see that the younger generation is quite thrilled and into it and directly starts creating, while adults are sometimes a bit careful and say, well, what's that? This is difficult technology. Oh, yeah. And yeah, now I should just place trees anywhere. How? Why? And they ask a lot of questions, and kids directly dive into it and just see what's possible and imagine. So I quite like that.
Cheers. Thanks so much for that.
Yeah, Daniel, we had Sophie did this Earth Imagination workshop. She's in Australia, so she's not on this call because it's the middle of the night there in Australia. But if you join the Imagination Group's Discord channel, it's posted there, where she held this imagination workshop with a group of 8-year-olds. Now, she didn't have access to Robin's and Sebastian's software, but I created this PDF kit and the kids just followed it, and what they came up with was phenomenal. They were just drawing all these crazy eco cities. They was making these whole eco worlds in Minecraft. Like, I was so blown away. I've been doing environmental sustainability building related like education and content for 20 years, and I'm like, I have never seen any of the adults in all this time do what these kids have done. And Robin, all he said is the kids were more creative and more open. So I just think there's like a magical intersection with kids somewhere between like the age of like 7 and 12, where they're old enough to understand the concepts but still young enough to have this sponge like mind to really get them into this stuff, and they can do things and think about things in the way that adults, we become more set and more fixed and also more distracted with just life. So I'm personally just really excited about what can be done with the kids in this space to help sort of hatch open this way of thinking. So if you want to do anything in it, just go for it. It's a really exciting possibilities, because the kids are also upset about climate change. Like teachers and people that I talk to who speak to young kids, I mean, they're stressed out about the whole climate message, and the eco futures message hasn't quite gotten to them the way the climate doom message has. So I feel like they need it as well, so they don't feel like they're walking into a future hellscape life.
What I experienced, we worked also a lot with children with another organization. It's called Youth Architecture City. And so children are very much know very many details of public space, because they use it really in a really different way than adults do. Adults just head through public space to do their job and do their things, and children really experience their spaces. So they are really experts on details and on materials and on places, and if you give them the chance to show what they think, they are really getting into that, and they can tell you which places they feel well and which places not. And it's really a great way to work with children on these issues. And so we did not try the AR with children until now, but I think it's really a great potential, because also this app from CityScaper really worked pretty well with any smartphone we use there. So it has higher performance with iPad Pro, but it also worked on any smartphone, and you just can design and show your friends and share, and even you can visit the place the day after and take your smartphone and have a look at the design, or a week later, and you can share it on site with the experience of this real space.
Yeah, hopefully we can really figure out how to get it more in the hands of kids to come up with some cool stuff. We better give it Tim. Tim has his hand up. Would you like to ask your question, Tim?
Sure. Yeah, this is awesome. I love seeing this together, coming together. Actually, when you and I first met, I think this was like the first idea that we ever talked about.
It was. So, Tim and I had a meeting because we had this idea about, maybe we could make like an augmented reality, like green thing. Basically what you've done, we were talking about it, but it was just a conversation. It never went anywhere. So we're very happy to have it built by somebody else.
Yeah. And so I think what I am most interested in is like very easy to use, like mass collaboration, like crowdsourcing of ideas. I posted a link. If you scroll up just a little bit, it's called Street Mix. And I don't know if you've seen Street Mix, Robin, but it's a very like low poly illustrations of the section view of a street. So you can put in the width of your street and your sidewalks, and then you can drag and drop the different elements, the different lanes. So you've got how wide is the sidewalk, how wide is the planting strip, is there a protected bike lane, and how wide is that? Is there a bus stop? What the car lanes widths are, and things like that. And it's just ridiculously easy. Like within 10 minutes, 20 minutes, you can create some design alternatives for a real street. And people use this and they take them to public meetings, especially when the options that the consultants or planners present are not good enough, right? Then as a citizen, you can come by and say, well, like, we know you can do it better because like I just came up with this. And yes, of course, there are certain rules and engineering standards that must be adhered to. I almost like to think of those as optional. New design guides come out that recommend other things, and we definitely need to push the mindset beyond like auto-centric planning of public space. So I think what I'm getting at is like, when do you think you'll see something that's like super easy for someone of low skill level, whether that's a child or an adult, to put together their own augmented reality concept of a street? I know that's probably pretty advanced, but if it goes toward that, where everybody can make their own models, and maybe even ideas can start to converge, and you can network different constituency groups together around a few different concepts. I think this can go really far in building the political will that is needed to make the street changes and to show lawmakers that like these indeed are going to be popular.
Quite cool tool. I have used it once, but I lost the link and I was always looking for it again. And now I got it. Directly noted it down. Thanks for that, Tim. So we currently work together with the government. It's more the Public Transport Authority. They have something called Future Network of Mobility. And with them together, we are building that solution. So they are funding us to build that. And our personal aim is to finish a good version of it until the end of the year. So beginning of 2023, we want to be done with that and push it out. The problem still is that we need to collect some data on the street. So how much space is left on the street? Where are the edges of the street? How's the street designed every certain lengths? And then to calibrate it, we still need the LOD2 models, which we currently have to collect manually for each street or each city or wherever we want to introduce the tool. So unfortunately it will be quite difficult to just push it out to any street in the world, but at least we can reduce our efforts we have to put in each solution by quite a lot, because we don't have to the 3D content is auto-generated, and we just have to set up the project, define the width of the street, and get the LOD2 model, and then we are done. So this is the hope to push it out and make it available to as many people as possible.
But I think from what I understand, once you've got one particular street set up, it does what you were saying, Tim, right? Like anybody can just go and create their own environments, but it just takes a fair bit of prep work beforehand to make sure the sandbox or the environment is created.
Once we set it up, everybody can use it, and can use it as long as it's there and as it's hosted on our server. Yeah.
And does each street have to be configured in your at this stage? Does each street have to be configured in your server? So I guess the real big question is like, when do we get the entire world this way, right? I mean, that's like the ultimate. Like, could I go out and just do my street? And obviously, you're just building this from the ground up, so I know that's far away. And my question to you, I suppose, and feel free to connect us offline, Katie, like what do you need to make that happen on a mass scale? Because I think if we had standardized building blocks of this is a standard sidewalk unit, a standard bike lane configuration, standard parking spot that's permeable or whatever it is, if you had this collection of raw materials, then all you're doing is placing the tiles like you are in a Lego model.
Yeah, Tim works for Lego, so he thinks like
Lego.
Cool. Yeah. It's all just we can put our future world together like Lego blocks.
It's like a Lego model, but just the problem will be that the models will fly around and they will be drifting around, and you don't know where to exactly put them in the real world. And it's not about the Lego parts to build something new, but it's about the old things and to align the new things with the old things virtually. That's a challenge we are facing, and that's where we're struggling. But I guess in the end, if you don't need high quality, to be honest, it could be quite easy that you go there and you start creating something and it flies around. Then you can move it to the correct space yourself, roughly, and then design your own street. It might be not perfectly aligned, and if you go further and if you walk a bit, things will start flying again and stuff. because we don't have the slope of the street and so on and so on. But generally, if you just need a quick revision of something, that's definitely an option to overcome those issues. Yeah, but we were quite impressed when we started the project ourselves, how much difference it is if you walk up a street, that there's suddenly 2 meters difference. You just walked up and you can barely see the slope, but it's 2 meters different, and you're standing right in the AR model, or it's flying above you, or it's below you, and you just like fly over it. And that's not easy in the real world. In the Lego world, perhaps everything is quite flat, and you have those you have fixed measures and so on. But in the real world, everything is floating.
I know that when I imagined this, it was based upon a flat. It was in Palo Alto, California, so it's like this very flat grid-like, and not thinking about hills and things. One last comment, super quick, and that is, you may be aware of this already, but Mojang Minecraft, they did this thing that's called block by block, and that's where I think they did it in Kenya, and it's taking a village and letting everyone get on computers with Minecraft and then reimagine their village square in a very massively collaborative way. And I think that it's a similar spirit. So thank you.
They're really cool. Like, Minecraft's doing really cool stuff. And I've seen also projects in Germany where they use Minecraft, and I've seen a project also with kids from the north of Germany, where kids built something in Minecraft, and they had like 2 days for it during school time as well. So they were all really motivated and built crazy things about the future cities. So it's also a very powerful tool I can definitely recommend for building the future with people.
Yeah, I'll try to share some of these eco cities that the kids from the Earth Imagination workshop did in Minecraft. I was really blown away by it. But Joe's had his hand up waiting for ages, so we've got to get Joe. Would you like to ask your question, Joe?
Sure. And just to say, the conversation about the scope for using these technologies within climate change education, that's as I said at the intro, that's what we're working on. If anyone's interested, we're actually pitching tomorrow at the Startup Accelerator that we're in, and we're looking more at room scale initially rather than world scale, partly for some of the technical reasons that Robin just explained. I guess I was just really interested, Robin, if you could give a bit more detail about how many people were working on this, how long it took, but just get a sense of positioning just how much effort it is to produce something of the quality you've produced, which is amazing. Really impressed by it, and I would love to connect after this.
So we have one main developer. It's a good friend of mine, and he's pushing most of the projects. We're currently 6 people in total. 2 are in the public relations, and 4 are developing currently. And we started the project end of 2019. So it has been 2 years now, I guess. Time flies by fast to build it from scratch. But now, with the basis we have and all the software parts we have, we can deploy projects already, I guess, within 1 or 2 weeks within the framework we built. So for each project now, it's not that much effort, but to build a basis and to set up an AR app with which you can calibrate yourself, and where people can participate, which you can download from a store and so on. And to set up a server setting and so on. That's a lot of effort, and you definitely would need, I guess, a year or at least half a year if you have quite a lot of people to pursue that. It's always depending on the quality you want to reach. And I just hope that the general AR tech gets better and better and better, so you don't need all that stuff. Apple is currently trying to also make the localization more easy in the whole of US, because they got 3D models themselves from the United States. So the advances that will, especially in the localization technique, that will make one-to-one AR in the real world more easy in the future, I hope.
I've not looked at it myself. There's also the Niantic platform, isn't there? Lightship, which effectively their aim is creating a platform for people to build Pokemon Go-like experiences on top of. But I mean, I think you're right. The investment that's going into this from all the big tech players is hopefully going to make these projects, will give us the building blocks to do cooler things more quickly. But I'm really impressed by the work. Really great project.
Yeah, Joe, I can put you in touch with some other people that do this type of AR as well. Like, there's the one with Sebastian and Robin is very geolocation based, really about cities. But there's some other people doing stuff that can be, for example, in gallery type experiences in rooms to do with like environmental futures or environmental communication. So we're all sort of getting to know each other around the world.
Yeah, no, that would be
quite
fantastic.
fun.
I'll message you after this or email you.
Yeah.
And let me just tell you that we are also working on a project to continue that in a more regional level, so that we hope that in autumn this year we will have the Biennial of urban landscape in Ruhr Metropolis, and we are starting to set up a module based on that, Imagine Green Urban Futures, and to bring it on a larger scale to discuss more regional approach on that and on different levels. So hope to stay connected with the Imagine project with Katie and the channels, the Discord channel, and we will see how we can put things together in the next month.
Yeah, and so there's a bunch of people that follow this that might work, for example, at the city of Sydney or the city of Palo Alto or the city of New York, and they might want to have it do exactly, they want to copy exactly what you've done with Lala Ruhr. If they get in touch with CityScaper or with you, Sebastian, I mean, can it be recreated? Robin, you just said you can set it up in a week or two if the city has like a good quality LiDAR scan. Can they get in touch and recreate this eco-imagination, augmented reality sort of festival for whatever town you come from?
Definitely. Just get in touch with me. Just send in my email. I'll send a link to my calendar so you can also grab an appointment if you want to. I scheduled some for the 25th of January because I'll be on holidays, some skiing trip. But anyways, just hit me up, and also I'm quite happy to get all that input today from all your guests, Katie. So I wasn't waiting the first 45 minutes. I was just experiencing and reading and looking around. So I'm also quite happy to share our experience if you want to build something similar, or if you want to build it together with us. And no matter what, just hit me up or book an appointment, and I'm happy to connect.
Well, I would be delighted to help inspire some existing cities to scratch together a bit of budget and put you in contact to like manifest the same experience without me having to do any work. That's what I want to achieve. Just introductions and small effort from me.
That would be amazing.
And then have it just magically just occur.
That's cool.
That's my dream. Low effort. Don't want to be slaving over. I spent years living in hacker houses in Silicon Valley, slaving over writing code, and I don't really want to do that anymore. And that's what you understand what it's like with the bugs. Yeah, crying, breaking furniture over the bugs, dealing with Vim shortcodes. Why do they not work? Why is it stuck? All that. Okay, so just one last question I'm going to ask for each, both Robin and Sebastian. We'll start with Robin. He's on the screen now. What are you most excited to work on or problem solve in the future with this?
I'm quite thrilled about mobility, especially right now, to push the green mobility into the city, because for me, at least in Germany, cars are hindering a lot of development, a lot of communication, and also change of society to more integrative, livable society where we are outside discussing together, working together, because currently our streets are no space where I want to stay for long. So we have to change that. And I hope to change that we push in other forms of mobility and take away cars and individual transport out of the city, but use it for other things that are more livable. And that's the challenge I want to solve.
It's a big one. I am totally right there with you. And the EV shift is like, I feel torn because like the EV is where the biggest low-hanging fruit is with carbon, but then it's just like everything will still be exactly the same. It'll just be EV. So it's like, but now, Sebastian, what are you most excited to work on in the future with environmental imagination?
Yeah, I think there are two things I really think are very important. It's what I already said. It's the space in front of your door. So the very space you use every day. And what we really want to work on now is a more far away vision of, so how can cities be in like 100 years? Because I think the most things we have done in the last decade, they are just too short scaled in the vision. And if something is really sustainable, it has to just last and belong to a better future in a longer distance. And I think it's really interesting to work also with different kinds of data and modeling, and to see how can cities and regions and landscapes transform in this larger time frame to develop idea of how to bring cities in the change to be really sustainable and for next generation. And so that's one thing we want to form in the project also, is the 100 years perspective of metropolis.
That's beautiful. I mean, with environmental sustainability, I think so many people don't realize that it takes, the way the urban environment has been built is so like reductive and short term. Water is separated from carbon, is separated from trees, is separated from the economy, and it all needs to be brought together and with a long-term vision. So that's really beautiful. So, all right, thank you so much, Robin and Sebastian, for joining us. I'm thrilled to be able to share your really exciting and world first project with the group and with the wider following. There's a super interesting group of attendees here on the call today that I hope you'll be able to connect with. And hopefully we'll be able to continue to promote your work and help this project spawn many others.